The war in Iran is escalating. The economic shocks might be huge. And now President Trump says America might attack Cuba next. How bad is it going to be? We're going to talk about that on this week's Reason Roundtable. Welcome to the Reason Roundtable. This is your libertarian review of news and culture from the editors of Reason Magazine. I'm your host, Peter Suderman, and today I am joined by Katherine Mangu-Ward, Matt Welch, and Nick Gillespie. Welcome to the show, everybody. Matt, I want to start with you here. So Donald Trump campaigned on bringing down prices and improving the economy and not starting new wars. And now it kind of seems like he started a new war that is going to raise prices and might ruin the economy. Explain this for me.
I think what happened to Donald Trump is the same thing that's happened to every president in the modern era, or at least in the post-Cold War era, with the possible exception of Joe Biden, which is that they've all had their Madeleine Albright moment. Let's recall in 1993-ish, Madeleine Albright was then a UN ambassador, said in exasperation to Colin Powell about Bosnia, what's the point of having this superb military if you're not ever going to use it? Every president gets to that place. Everyone. It's so Trump discovered that he could press the big red button saying military, and he could, with very minimal American damage to American lives, get rid of the Venezuelan dictator and put him in a jail about a mile and a half from where I'm sitting. That was very exciting for him. It was very exciting for Marco Rubio, who thought, okay, now this is the domino that's going to help Cuba go next. And so Trump thinks that he can get a series of regime change or transition wars done kind of on the cheap by pressing the big red button. And that's what he's trying to do. And what we're seeing now is that oil's gone up above $100 a share, $100 a barrel, and all kinds of unforeseen consequences are unforeseen consequencing themselves, not least of which is prices of everything are going to go up. So sadly, it's what happens. You have availability to power, you use it.
Yeah, oil prices, as we are speaking today, they are fluctuating. They've dropped below $100 a barrel today. They've also risen above, up to about $120 a barrel. But this is up from $65 a barrel a week or two ago. This is a big increase, even if it's not quite 100 when this podcast publishes. And that means gas is going to be more expensive. Flights are going to be more expensive. Everything is going to be more expensive because everything uses energy. Katherine, I saw you smiling when Matt mentioned Madeleine Albright.
Matt loves to mention Madeleine Albright, and rightly so, because that really is a seminal moment. Just this, if we're not going to use it, why do we have it question? And of course, my answer now and always is great question. We could consider not having it. We don't need the big, beautiful military, maybe, is a topic we could at least discuss.
Well, how are we going to protect ourselves from Iran?
Yeah, good point.
The Venezuela thing, Nick, this seems to be the best explanation that people have for Trump's behavior right now is that Trump looked at the Venezuela operation and was like, that went great. Let's do it again. Did it go great?
Yeah, we don't know because Maduro's gone. It was a decapitation, not a regime change, which is also kind of what Trump is saying here. Let me pick a little bit of a bone with Matt. All of these are foreseen consequences. If you bomb one of the major oil-producing countries in the world in the place that produces a ton of oil, there's probably oil is going to get more expensive for all sorts of reasons, even if the U.S. makes more oil than anybody and things like that. This is the part of Matt's analysis that I think you skimped on, Matt, is the domestic issue, which helps explain the timing of foreign policy things. Bill Clinton was great at bombing other countries whenever he was in trouble domestically. Donald Trump is also doing that now. His domestic agenda is kind of going tits up. He just had an awful jobs report on top of other jobs reports. He is worried about his domestic legacy. And then, when the domestic side isn't going well, you start looking overseas. But everything that is happening now, including the fact that Iran is fighting back, that they didn't just roll over, all of this is stuff that anybody would have told Donald Trump had he bothered to ask. This is like Doge. The Doge people didn't want to talk to people who'd come up with all sorts of ways of actually cutting government spending and or making it more efficient. So it went nowhere. Trump did the same thing with foreign policy. This is an insane escalation in a war of choice, and the consequences are going to be long-lasting and far-reaching, and it's a damn shame.
Matt, they seem surprised. The administration seems surprised that oil prices are going up here, which is funny for a lot of reasons. Among them, that there's been this other controversy about how they're using AI to plan the war, and if you ask Claude or ChatGPT, hey, what happens if you go to war in Iran? Like, one of the first things it says is, well, oil prices are probably going to go up.
Yeah, I mean, the point of the phrase unforeseen consequences is not to say that they're not predictable by people from the outside, but that the planners of the war, the people who want to hit the button, or, this is kind of important and pursuant to your question, the people who are trying to sell Donald Trump, a perhaps semi-reluctant Donald Trump, that no, you should go ahead and press the button. Those people are going to have maybe their own incentives for not stressing how it might go pear-shaped. It might last longer than expected. It might be more complicated. The regime might be more embedded than you had previously thought. So these are foreseen consequences, but the very people who are carrying this out are not foreseeing them. And that is what happens in almost every single war, and is reason, pragmatic reason, not an ideological reason, very, very pragmatic reason to be wary of going to war in the first place. It creates all kinds of things that the planners themselves did not foresee.
Katherine, one of the reasons why oil prices seem to be going up is that the tanker ships that would normally go through the Strait of Hormuz have mostly been stymied. It's like 85 to 90% closed there, maybe not completely. And Trump is responding to this by these risk insurance, military escorts for all the oil tankers that are going through the Strait of Hormuz. But he also said, and this is a real quote, as far as I can tell, these ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts.
Just go for it.
There's nothing to be afraid of.
I love, I guess, the vision that Trump has, which is I think it's very cinematic, right? It's like a ship's captain just battening down the hatches and being like, we're making a run for it, boys. I suspect that's what he thinks happens in this situation, and others, because Donald Trump is a regular American in this way. And so he just kind of imagines stuff the way Hollywood might have shown it to him at some point. He hasn't read deeply on this matter, if I had to guess.
There's nothing to be afraid of. That's crazy. There are murder drones flying all over.
Yeah. There's nothing to be afraid of other than the murder drones, right? It's fine. That's actually, again, a great trailer line, if I may say, what I just offered you there. But I also think war is bad for trade. War is bad for trade. It's just one of those things. And war at a choke point for trade is doubly bad for trade. It's not just oil tankers to go through. It's, fertilizer, helium, all kinds of stuff that you don't think about until you don't have it anymore.
Well, we've been thinking about this for a while in a different way, because one of the things that struck me about this war is kind of a demonstration of what would happen if the environmentalists, but also the anti-free trade people got their way. Because they have been arguing, the left and the right in different ways have been arguing for years that we need to curtail energy production and also restrict trade. And that's what's happening now, Katherine, right? That, and it's not great.
Yeah, this is the war Greenpeace wanted, I guess.
That explains that weird mailing I got from them last week.
You just were used to getting oily penguins or whatever, and
That's
then all
right.
of a sudden it was watch out for the Ayatollah. Yeah.
Wait, does that mean Iran is the whales?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. We're trying to save the whales for sure.
I don't know
How come we don't save the whales anymore? Remember we used to always be saving the whales? Did they get saved?
So there's actually been restrictions on whaling, and it still happens in Japan, and Greenpeace is still mad about this, and that's a completely different podcast.
And,
is it the bees? We saved the bees, right?
Carvel refused to stop selling Fudgy the whale, so it all
rightly
fell apart.
So. Fudgy is delish.
And
Fudgy is a top tier birthday cake.
Gowanus is still a revenge.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
We're sorry, Suderman. Go ahead.
No, this is fine because the mention of Japan made me think about a question that I've been thinking about here, which is the China aspect of all of this. And there's sort of two right now. No, but it's over there. It's over there. It's in the right. Like you can when you say the word Japan, when you say the word China, your brain
talking.
flips the map, right? Flips the globe, and then you can see that.
I feel like a Mickey Rooney impersonation is about to present itself.
Okay.
Happened, in fact.
I can see Asia from my house. Go ahead.
But there have been two kind of prevailing theories about the role of China here. One is that Trump is trying to disarm or sort of cut off China from this something in the Middle East, right? Right. We've seen people sort of say this is a war to sort of knock out one leg of China's international global ambitions. And then we've also seen things like, people saying, well, look, if things get bad enough here, China might feel like they have to intervene. And this goes to the escalation question that I just want to ask you, Nick. How worried should we be about escalation generally right now? I mean, this war already seems to be wider and larger than Trump anticipated. There are concerns that China is going to jump in. There are concerns that I think not just concerns. Donald Trump is out there saying maybe we're also going to wage war in Cuba next at the same time. This all seems kind of crazy, especially from a guy who campaigned on the main thing I won't do is get you into new wars.
Right. I have not heard a lot about China getting involved. Russia supposedly is already helping Iran. And isn't China the place with the guy who said, when your enemy is destroying themselves, don't get in their way? I think China
that
will
was their initial
sit
reaction.
This out. Yeah, I think China will sit this one out, especially if Russia is starting to get involved, because Lord knows Putin doesn't have any kind of domestic problems or other foreign policy problems he wouldn't want to distract people from. So I'm not too worried about China here, but the escalation of the war or the contagion effect, whatever we want to call it, again, completely predictable and understandable. And this is why you don't go to war, as Donald Rumsfeld said, with the, not with the army you want, but the army you've got or the circumstances you want. This is why you build a consensus. This is why you build alliances in the region. This is why you do a lot of planning before war. And to my mind, and I realize I'm probably getting senile, but we went through this with a country that was Iraq, like just one letter different and just shares a border with Iran 25 years ago or 20 years ago. And it doesn't seem as if any of those lessons have really stuck, at least among Republicans in the White House and the Democrats, as Matt pointed out, I think last week, the Democrats who will not vote against this war, just like they voted much more in favor of invading Iraq in 2003 than they did during the first Gulf War back in the 90s. It's shameful all around. And this is one more reason why, if you're not libertarian, and you don't distrust your government or feel like they don't really have your best interest at heart, take another look. Sign up for Reason. I think we give out a couple free issues.
If I can clarify briefly on Cuba stuff, the threat to Cuba the military threat to Cuba is much more implied than actual. We published a piece this morning on it on the website. They are talking about they're going to have a deal. The deal, of course, the sort of the whisper, the hot breath of the deal over here is that, we just plucked Maduro out of his circumstance. We did it while killing 32 Cubans. And, I'm just saying, might be a good time to deal. So it's there, but I don't think that there's an actual active threat to use U.S. military force in Cuba right now. But let's come back in, 3 days.
You don't think that what Trump is saying basically is we might do the same thing in Cuba that we did in Venezuela, that we are in some sense trying to do in Iran? Obviously, the circumstances are different. I don't think that we are going to go to war in Cuba in the way that we're going to war in Iran. That's not what I'm saying. But Venezuela clearly influenced his decision to go into Iran. And it also seems to be the model for whatever he thinks we might be doing in Cuba.
Right now, what we're doing in Cuba is that Marco Rubio is negotiating with Raul Castro's grandson, who's a ratbag 41-year-old drug dealer, and doing it in such a way to keep the Castro regime in place, but maybe get rid of the president. So it's looking much more like a possible Delcy Rodriguez kind of situation. And Cuba is incredibly desperate. As bad as Venezuela has had it, Cuba right now, people are just picking through their garbage for food. And there's outages of every basic human material. So there is a desperation at play. Yes, that threat is there. And that is why the conversation is even beginning. That and the fact that they've been cut off from their Venezuelan oil and don't really have a benefactor anymore. But in the American planning and the way that they're talking about it, force right now, besides just a lot of leverage and threatening, and maybe we'll have a Justice Department indictment against the leadership of Cuba, but it's not a military threat right now.
So speaking of sons, grandsons, and successors, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was killed in the opening salvo of airstrikes in the war in Iran, it looks like his son is next in line to be Iran's supreme leader. And this is not, I'm not going to tell you that I've been reading up on his biography for the past year or whatever, but the headlines this morning strongly suggest that he would be another hardliner, that this is not in any way a kind of shift of direction for Iran. If anything, it is sort of further down the road that Trump says he wants to stop, that he wants with regime change here. Nick, do you have any thoughts about this, or sort of about isn't this the sort of thing that people warn about? Like, oh yeah, you take out the bad leadership, and often what happens is the people who replace them are even worse.
Yeah, well, there's two things to say about that. One is that the history of authoritarian rulers then having their kids take over doesn't end well. And in the modern period, this was what happened with Oliver Cromwell and the Commonwealth of England. Richard Cromwell took over, and it would really be like having Eric Trump become the next president. You just know from the get-go, like that part of the gene pool is a little bit shallow, and the chlorine isn't quite right.
Let's
so I
check
feel
back
bad.
in 2028.
Yeah. We'll see. I think Tiffany Trump has probably got a better shot at going, getting the nomination at this point.
Hi, Trump's doing great social media, taking the Secret Service to Erewhon.
The other, the other thing about the hardliner stuff, again, this is something that is a predictable consequence, and it may not last in the long run, but it is it can do a lot of damage in the short run. So this is something that a lot of people were talking about. And, if in fact it's true that Trump was like, oh, it was so easy to go in and arrest Maduro and bring him to Brooklyn, so now I'm going to bomb a much bigger country in a much more strategically dense and complicated part of the world. And all I'm going to do is drop tons of bombs and then eventually send troops in, because you'll notice, what are we, like a week plus in? And they're already talking about, well, boots on the ground. In another week, they will go from no boots on the ground to we're not ruling out boots on the ground to there have always been boots on the ground. This is, again, looking at Trump as in his most problematic way, which is that he does not think about things ahead of time. He does not select the best people, and he does not listen to good advice until the markets start tanking. So that is probably our, between the midterms and the markets tanking, that will be the corrective that changes Trump's strategy.
We also killed his father and wife and son.
And mother.
That's not going to make for a friendly follow-on leader in this region. That's a villain origin story, if ever I heard one. And here we are now with a new villain.
And Israel is already threatening to kill whoever succeeds the Ayatollah. And actually, Katherine, I wanted to ask you about Israel's role here, because one of the sort of mini dramas, the subplots that we went through last week as the administration was trying to come up with a rationale for this war, was that Secretary of State Rubio and Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, people in Republican politics who theoretically should know and should be on message, both said pretty explicitly and pretty clearly that the reason for the timing of the strike, the reason that Trump got us into this war, was that Israel was going to strike, had plans to strike first, or some sort of plans to strike. And they were worried that Iran was going to preemptively strike versus the Israel strike. So they wanted to preemptively preempt the Iran strike. Mm-hmm. And this got interpreted by people like Republican Thomas Massie into Israel dragged America into a war. Massie tweeted, "The administration admits Israel dragged us into the Iran war that's already cost 2 American lives and billions of dollars. Before it's over, the price of gas, groceries, and virtually everything else is going to go up. The only winners in the USA are defense company shareholders." What do you make of this argument?
The last 2/3 of it were pretty right, I would say. I think I'm very wary of ever using this rhetoric of, Israel dragged us into the war unless we really think that that's true and have good evidence for it, because there are lots of second order repercussions of that sort of thing, not least just kind of general anti-Semitism, which does seem to follow these sorts of things. I think that, though, more broadly, like, this is what happens when you have entangling alliances, right? Like, we have many, many friends all around the world, and we have subtle and complicated and secret deals with many, many, many countries all around the world about what we would or wouldn't do in each and every eventuality. And then when you layer on top of that, Donald Trump is president, and so he just might do whatevs. It's going to make it possible to do every conspiracy theory you want if this is the thing that you were in the mood to do. And like I say, I think conspiracy theories about Israel are particularly dangerous because they have implications for an entire religion and ethnicity of people.
One of the worries that people have right now about escalation is that this is going to turn into World War III, that it's going to be a nuclear war. This is that kind of worry has escaped containment, and now you hear it from people who have columns at the New York Times. It's not just the kind of fringes of X here. And in fact, the polymarket odds last week, I didn't check them this morning, but the polymarket odds of a nuke detonating, I guess it's just anywhere in warfare on the planet, before the end of June, were at 17% next week. Now, that's not that high. On the other hand, that's nearly, it's like 1 in 6 or something like that for nuclear war, basically. How worried are we here?
Man, Peter, you get worried about nuclear war 17 times a year. Someone who did not grow up, war games, you didn't see that in the theater, sir. Some of us did.
Actually, I just saw a revival screening
that
in a theater
count. We know
year.
This.
It wasn't embedded in your psyche at the key moment.
Red
but
Dawn.
I mean, Suderman and I grew up
Is
in
the one where
Cold War.
Christopher Plummer is all of the characters now?
I think
what are those redos?
We have all of these lurking Sovietologists. We have all these people who want to use their I thought really hard about what would happen if the nukes nuked to talk about it. Don't you think some of this is just the punditocracy and academia wants to have this conversation?
I think it's that there are a lot of nuclear weapons out there. They are now controlled by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and the world is becoming more volatile as we speak. And that's a good reason to raise your estimation of that nukes might be used in warfare.
If you're really worried about nukes, then one should be thinking more about the U.S. role in unilateral non-proliferation. Whenever we decide that we don't like the idea of someone pursuing nuclear weapons, we hold it within our remit to maybe we just have to do a little preemptive war to clean that out. I'm not saying that there isn't an argument for that is plausible. Iran has been looking for a nuclear weapon for a long time. It's been doing awful things in its region, developing all these technologies. I personally do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That seems bad. I don't like it that Pakistan has nuclear weapons. That seems bad. Or that North Korea now has weapons. But what happens to a world in which you always, if you're a crappy regime, and you don't want to get blown up by the United States, what are you going to do? You're going to rush. You're going to run, not walk, and get yourself a nuclear weapon. So I think we're in an age of arms race and nuclear proliferation, not non-proliferation, in part due to the wonderful reflexive math of us doing non-proliferation.
I also think, though, if I'm going to pick a side between is it the OMG, we're about to do the nukes people, or the this war will be glorious and short people, who I'm more worried about? It's the this war will be glorious and short people. I keep thinking about the Battle of Bull Run. Is that the Civil War battle where all the people from Washington came to picnic because they were like, this is going to be cool and we can just sit on the hill here and watch a bunch of Confederate butt get kicked, and then they had to flee the scene, and congressmen were kidnapped, and it was a whole situation. this war will be glorious and short mentality has done just such spectacular amounts of harm in world history. And I think the quote unquote success of Venezuela has really fueled that.
I would be concerned about, though, this war will be glorious and short people because they have control of nuclear weapons and might be tempted to use them to make the war a little shorter, or at least that's what they think is going to happen. And that would be great. Speaking of things that need to be short, this segment, we need to move on here. So to another topic about defending the homeland, because Kristi Noem is out at the Department of Homeland Security. Noem presided most famously over harsh immigration tactics in Minnesota, two big accomplishments, as DHS secretary seemed to be, lying to the public and to other people a whole lot, smearing Americans killed by immigration agents in Minnesota, and then appearing in a $220 million advertising campaign in which she got glamour shots on a horse. Katherine, do you have anything nice to say about Kristi Noem?
You know, I always kind of secretly wanted to get one of those glamour shots in the mall.
On a horse?
When we were like teenagers and you could go to the mall and they would like put the like soft filter and like put a bunch of makeup on you and like for some reason always like a sequined top hat.
It was literally called glamour shots.
I mean,
it was called glamour shots.
Go on Fox, Katherine.
And in fact, the experience of going on Fox in the like mid-aughts absolutely scratched that itch for me. Yeah. Kristi Noem also got to go on Fox in the mid-aughts, so I don't know why she didn't get enough, but somehow she got a taste for it. Do I have anything nice to say about her? No.
Nick, anything nice? Kristi Noem,
I like that she picked the Mount Rushmore backdrop for her glamour shot. That was very nice. She was incompetent, and unlike most people who get kicked out of office can at least run for dog catcher, but we know that she foreclosed that with her the lead anecdote or the big anecdote from her latest, possibly her last book. Good riddance.
Oh, definitely
to
not her
rubbish.
last book. Don't you think there'll be another book?
I think it's going to be hard.
For the dog's sake, I hope not.
She will have to crowdsource it. Let's put it this way. She's going to be doing a GoFundMe on that. I think it's going to be very hard for her to publish a book unless she moves into a house with Olivia Nuzzi or something like that.
Would you make a bet? Would you make a bet with me, Nick?
Sure.
I think there's going to be another book by with the byline. I won't say by Kristi Noem, but with the authorial credit to Kristi Noem.
Okay. I will take that bet, but I will say it does not come from a major publishing house.
No, this is going to be. We're going to hash out the details in the comments, Nick, because what's a major? But we're going to have to. We'll figure out.
I'll do that in totally good faith. I'm just saying it will be something like the Charlemagne Press or something. It will.
I think this book is going to come out after all the major publishing houses have crumbled, and there is no such thing anymore, and it will be a real book that will sell copies. So we'll figure out the details. But I would make you a bet.
Can we get this on Kalshi along with the nuclear odds? Matt, how excited should she be about her new role as special envoy to the Shield of Americas? And also, what is that?
It's a body of Latin American grandees who had a meeting over the weekend at which Donald Trump talked about how he's going to take back Cuba. So it ain't nothing. It's a thing. I think it's right there with one of his board of peace kind of things. She should be thrilled that she's not completely having tire tracks over her back at this point. And we should be maybe moderately at least intrigued that Donald Trump has found a level of corruption that he finds to be intolerable. Or at least, she spent that ad money very, very corruptly, but on herself, not on him. And then told people that he approved, which he probably did, for being honest. But he didn't like the way that sounded.
She said it a year before the congressional testimony, and then she said it again under oath.
Yeah. But as Jacob Solom has written for our site, always read Jacob Solom.
Yes.
It was.
I like that. That's what Jacob wrote for our site.
Yes. He should because he's right, or at least I am when I say that. Anyways, the total wrong reason to fire her. The reason to fire her is that she slandered two American citizens as domestic terrorists who were killed by their own government in the guise of enforcing immigration law. That's just intolerable. Sadly, so did the President of the United States and his deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, and other people. And that's kind of just the fallen world that we live in. But that's a real reason to want to fire somebody. And I'm not weeping for even a half second. And we should just remember that regardless of who gets moved around in immigration, at least in enforcement, at least the way it's done right now, there's no change in policy that is evident, or even regardless of what Donald Trump says. And he said some comment over the last 72 hours of like, oh, we're not going to, take out the maid and the people who are here doing work, and people get really excited for a half a second and then forget that the enforcement actions continue to go on and continue to transgress the rights of U.S. citizens in addition to the actual rights. There are rights for people who are residents in the United States who don't have citizenship.
Katherine, you want to talk about the sex plane? Sorry, alleged adultery airplane?
I do not, but I will. Yes, Matt is right that is the real reason she should have been fired. And the photo shoot is also not great. But if we are keeping a tally here, we also have the alleged use of a rented and I think intended to be purchased fancy schmancy plane with alleged affair partner Corey Lewandowski. This, among other details that came to light around this, was the firing of a Coast Guard pilot because maybe Corey Lewandowski, allegedly, because a blanket that Noem wanted was not transferred to a second plane after a maintenance problem. And I feel that this detail,
like one of those Snuggies with the arms in it.
I feel that this detail has been underreported. He then had to be rehired because there was no one else to fly the plane, which I just think is like a delightful. We had a discussion about this in the office this morning because I am of the opinion that adults don't travel with blankies. But I
well,
got
you've
pushback.
never been the governor of a tiny population state either, have you?
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, North Dakota is cold, right? So I guess maybe
But
she's more likely.
She's South Dakota.
I hate it when I mix up the Dakotas.
Just move to Canada.
It makes the Dakotans so mad.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
Yes, all 8 of them.
And so maybe there's a cold thing there. I get that, but fancy planes got blankets on them already. You don't need your special blankie unless it's like a lovey, like a snuggly blankie. In which case, I have more questions.
Who's going to rent the sex plane after this?
Cash
I hate the vendor. You Cash Patel,
on the
or
flip
maybe
side,
they borrowed it from him.
Is the blanket? Are they trying to keep things more sanitary? Maybe actually, now that I'm thinking about it,
I don't know.
Allegedly,
it's really just a reason never only fly commercial at this point. For God's sake.
Because it's cleaner than
you have
sex
no
plane.
idea what that private plane has been through.
That is true.
Yeah, but those
Allegedly.
commercial flights are going to get very, very expensive because of this war, driving up the cost of oil, plane fuel, and we're already seeing. I mean, it just looks like it's going to become very, very expensive to fly. And again, this is the sort of thing that Donald Trump ran against. Oh, you don't like when stuff's really expensive when prices go up. And Donald Trump was like, if you elect me, we won't do wars, and that won't happen. And you elected him, and we got wars, and that's happening. I do have something nice to say about Kristi Noem. Kind of nice to say about Kristi Noem. I think she reminded people of something that's important, which is that DHS shouldn't exist. And her tenure there was so awful that even some of the people who worked for Barack Obama, senior officials, are saying, yeah, actually, maybe all of those libertarians who said at the time that we shouldn't create DHS because it's just going to be a domestic liberty infringing organization run through the executive branch. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we shouldn't have that. Maybe we shouldn't be spending all this money on something that fundamentally, what did we get from that over the last year under Kristi Noem? We got a couple of dead Americans, and we got some really brutal, really aggressive immigration enforcement tactics that no one liked, that even supporters of Trump's immigration campaign rhetoric said, hey, that went too far. And so thank you, Kristi Noem, for reminding people that DHS sucks. With that, we're going to take a break and come back with a listener question about drugs. Hey, Reason Roundtable listeners. Do you know a student looking for a serious intellectual experience that strengthens the foundations of a free society? Reliance College invites students ages 16 to 24 to the 2026 Great Connections Seminar in Chicago. It's from July 26th to August 2nd. This year's theme is Reason and Love. It explores the ideas that shape character, choice, and human flourishing. Students engage directly with thinkers like Aristotle, Ayn Rand, and Alexis de Tocqueville in small, dynamic discussion groups where every claim requires evidence and reasoning. They don't sit through lectures. They practice thinking for themselves. Outside the seminar room, students explore Chicago's cultural landmarks, analyze art firsthand, experience live improv comedy, and build friendships rooted in shared intellectual ambition. Parents, if you want your student equipped to reason independently, to speak confidently, and to contribute meaningfully to a free society, this program was built for your kids. Registration is just $900, including room for the entire week. Scholarships are available. Visit reliancecollege.org/reason to learn more and apply. That's reliancecollege.org/reason. All right. As a reminder, we do love to answer your questions. You can send your short, succinct, pithy, and otherwise not very long questions to podcasts@reason.com. That's podcasts@reason.com. Please put the words listener question in the subject line so that we know it's a listener question. This week's listener question comes from Diana, who writes, there seems to be a lot of drug use going on in the libertarian world. I've never really done any drugs. What would you recommend? Nick Gillespie, you want to start?
Yeah. Sure, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, start alphabetically.
Any in particular?
Yeah. Start
Is there
with
like
A's, Adderall,
you pair them with experiences?
Alprazolam. No, if you're not doing drugs, don't do them. If you're interested, ask your friends and ask their, what are their experiences. But depending on your age, I think one of the places where a lot of older people, and I don't know if Diana is older or younger or just the right age, but are finding psychedelics interesting because they are both individual. You have like cool, interesting trips, but they're also often done in a group setting, which is very fun. So it's, drugs are a technology. I'm working on a documentary called Better Living Through Chemistry. Legal, illegal, licit, illicit, mind expanding, body optimizing. There's so much out there. Talk to your friends and see what their experiences are like and what's your itch. There is definitely something out there for you, and you might get it through a psychiatrist or you might get it through some shady character that lives in Matt's neighborhood. But talk to your friends and figure out what you want to do and how they do it.
So you say talk to your friends, and you also say that psychedelics can be a social experience. Do you make friends while taking psychedelics?
Absolutely, and there are a million different psychedelic subcultures, and they are particularly interesting because, in my experience, the psychedelic community is the one place in regular American life, if it counts as regular American life, where different people of different ages and different generations get together in a non-hierarchical setting. So it's not like going to church or to school or to college or working in an office or anything like that, but where people of different ages freely mix and they talk and they share experiences and insights in a very kind of egalitarian, equalized way that is rare and is kind of beautiful when it happens. And again, you have this great support network where you learn how to do things better. You learn what to avoid. You get good supply versus bad supply. And it's, part of what doing drugs is they can bring us better, they can bring us together. And psychedelics definitely do that.
Solution to bowling alone. Katherine, do you just take what the witch gives you?
Yeah, that's good advice, actually. If if a lady comes out of the woods with something in her hand, you should probably take it.
I've read a lot of stories about that. It seems to go well for the children.
Yeah. No, Nick is right that in terms of, he didn't phrase it this way, but I will, the cost benefit of almost any recreational substance for anyone over 35, psychedelics are probably going to give you the best set of trade-offs. I think that's one way to think about it.
What are the trade-offs?
So if you're younger, there's a little more of a chance you're going to scramble your brain like an egg, but it's pretty hard to overdose on psychedelics for the most part. And all the reasons that Nick just described make it sort of an attractive option, I think, for people who are a little bit older. But I will actually put in a bid for not going along with a concept that haunts the world of drugs, both prescription and recreational, which is the idea that things that are natural are better. That is garbage. That is a terrible idea. And like RFK Jr. is out here pushing it, as well as like the lady who you met at yoga class is also pushing it. And
like you want the red dye in your MDMA?
You want the red dye. But more importantly, like there are a sort of miraculous assortment of prescription drugs that can really help people who need all kinds of help. And to say that's not natural is a dumb idea. And also, some of the most fun psychedelics are not natural. And I think in that world especially, you sometimes get a like, oh, it's plant medicine, da, 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 da. Like, sure, whatever, plants are great, but also like chem labs are great. So just don't get seduced by if it's natural, it must be better. I don't think that's right.
Matt, are you just high on life all the time?
Yeah, I say nope to dope and ugh to drugs, personally. But there was a time, like 10 years ago or so, of recurring back problems, not to overshare. But I had to take a flight and my back was torqued and I was screwed. And there's just no way that I was going to be able to survive even being on an airplane. It was so painful.
Well, and especially because you were flying with Kristi Noem, so you were expected to perform.
Correct.
Right? That's why your back was fucked up to begin with.
I was just thinking.
Was I not supposed to share that, Matt? I'm sorry.
Fine.
It was so cold on the plane.
There was no blanket.
So I went to urgent care. I'm like, dudes, anything. Just, I don't care. Make me survive this flight. And they're like, take this 30 minutes before you go on the flight. And they took it 30 minutes before I went on. and like 30 minutes later, I was like, wow, I'm not in pain anymore. And I'm kind of happy. What the hell? This is crazy. This is the best election I've ever seen. And got to LA and talked to a mutual friend of all of ours. And she was like, well, what did you get? And I handed it to her and she said, you just took Xanax. So Xanax, I think I've never taken it since. It was so good. It was so good for someone who's like wound up in their head and do not want to microdose with Katherine, Nick, or any of their friends.
It's $8 for a month's supply.
I mean, holy cow. I would absolutely become addicted to that because it cured my pain.
Yeah, I recommend martinis. Because they taste better than straight ethanol, though, if that's your thing. But no, martinis and ibuprofen, they go together really well. Not because you're going to get hungover the next day, but because if you're going to drink martinis, especially like I do, you're going to need to go to the gym and you're going to need to run. And if you're a middle-aged man doing any of those things, your joints are going to hurt like shit all the time, just constantly. I get up after this podcast and I like groan and creak. I can barely stand because I've been sitting for an hour. So ibuprofen.
This is the three-legged stool is martinis, ibuprofen, and running.
Lifting, swimming, running, yeah.
Because I'm not against it. I just want to be clear as listener service.
And
endorphins.
With
They're
the
good.
Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which ibuprofen is one, you always have to be careful about booze and your liver functions.
That's true.
So,
I've heard about that. That's fake.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Matt, I was wondering if you've ever had or Katherine or Peter for this instance. I thought you were going to say, Matt, I took this 30 minutes, before the plane starts, and then you hear, sorry, the flight has been delayed or canceled. And then you are tripping balls and you are like, all right, I guess I'm going to the Jimmy John's at Newark Airport.
And the reason the flight is delayed is because DHS funding has been cut. Because there's no funding deal and TSA isn't letting people through. And
rite of passage, obviously, in Southern California and probably Florida as well, is that you eat a bunch of pot brownies, go to Disneyland. And so I didn't really know how to make pot brownies, didn't have Catherine's recipe. And so I tried to make them and they tasted disgusting and had a couple and they didn't work. You guys know where this is going. Yeah, I don't
what do you mean they didn't work? You got to explain that.
Really don't recommend like finishing the pan of pot brownies before going in as a weird looking college student to Disneyland. It's a bad idea.
I do recommend Catherine's pot brownies. Really excellent. And she published her recipe in an issue of Reason several years ago.
We will put it in the show notes.
That's very helpful.
All right, let's move on to our final topic here, some interesting recent polling. Nick, I want to start with you. There is a poll that came out from Gallup in which Americans still say, this is not exactly a new finding, but it's relevant, I think, to libertarians, that Americans are still saying that government is the country's top problem. 29% of U.S. adults in February cited some aspect of government or politics as the country's most important problem. It's 32% in January, so government's got maybe a little less bad between January and February, and 26% in December. But this is a pretty consistent finding in this Gallup poll. What do you make of this?
I think that people understand intuitively and sometimes explicitly that the government controls too many aspects of their lives. It interferes with things either directly or indirectly. And that gets foregrounded when you have a government which is not only too big, but is quite erratic and volatile. That defines Trump's second term, even more than his first term. There will be a corrective coming later this year, but it becomes front of mind. There's also recent data showing that Democrats are now believing that the government is too big, the government is too powerful. That will change the minute a Democrat gets in the White House, and the Republicans will, suddenly, and conservatives and liberals, et cetera. But I think, this is an ongoing problem. It's very consistent finding the government is too big and it tries to do too many things. People know that. And if only we had a political party, it could be the Republicans, it could be the Democrats, it could be somebody else with a different name who could actually explain why that is and elect people on a guarantee that they follow through on saying we're going to reduce the size, scope, and spending of government because you, the American people, generally know better how to live your lives, how to spend your money, and how to raise your kids.
So just a quick follow-up on that is that one of the next top answers was immigration. Like if you're for problems with America, it's like government is the biggest problem and immigration is right after that, with about a fifth of people saying it's a big problem. Does that maybe suggest that their problem with government is not that it's too big, but that it's not doing enough?
No, I actually don't think so, because if you look, and Gallup does this a couple times a year, where they look at, do people like immigration, or do they think immigrants and immigration is good for the country? It's always a supermajority that says yes. And the problem is that government controls immigration. You haven't heard a lot of people talking, when we were talking about Kristi Noem, the southern border, which was always overblown as a fear point in American discourse, that has been effectively controlled. People are not, and people aren't upset, because if that's done correctly, we understand that. What government has failed to do since the second Reagan administration is actually come up with a workable immigration process that allows people who are willing to be vetted, who don't have communicable diseases and violent criminal past, to enter the country freely and work and add to the Commonwealth. And there is a huge amount of support for that across virtually every demographic in America. So if government wants to be less of a problem, they should figure out a way to fix legal immigration, reduces the pressure for illegal immigration, and things move forward very well.
I think
also, Katherine, go ahead.
Just that the whole question of what's the biggest problem, it measures where the froth is coming out of your mouth. Exactly. It measures the thing that you're most passionate about. And in our era of negative polarization right now, where people vote against and not for often, I think a lot of that government is the biggest problem answer is just that the government as controlled by this person in this party who I find loathsome is the problem. And I think immigration is kind of a similar issue. It is consistently, as a broad topic, popular, and always has been and probably always will be. Different breaks down on what you enforce and how and why, two ways of complexity that the Trump administration really, I don't think, has grappled with or understood, and has suffered as a result. But for the people who really think that immigration is the biggest problem, they really think that immigration is the biggest problem. So it measures intensity, is what I'm saying. It doesn't necessarily think that if you get a room full of 100 Americans that the second biggest problem will be immigration necessarily. I think it measures the intensity.
I think the froth is what happens after you eat all the pot brownies before you go to Disneyland. No, on the immigration thing, Katherine, actually, we were talking about this with Kristi Noem, right? Like part of what her tenure revealed was that people don't like these harsh immigration tactics, these workplace raids, that sort of thing. And that is reflected in the polling on ICE. And so there's an NBC poll that shows that ICE has a 38% positive rating, not very high. But the thing I wanted to ask you about was something else. In that same poll, what's below ICE in popularity? Artificial intelligence, 26% popular. Right? People hate AI. And it reminded me actually of an interesting Jasmine Sun essay that went around on Substack recently. Jasmine Sun is a tech writer who lives on the West Coast in San Francisco, I believe, and she came to DC, looked at data centers out in Loudoun County, but also talked to policymakers. And her big conclusion was, you aren't ready, especially people in tech are not ready for how much normal people hate AI.
I think it might be one of these things, though, where by the time normal people meaningfully need to weigh in on AI, it will already be totally integrated into their lives and they'll be dependent on it and they'll still say they hate it, but that won't matter in the way it sounds like that might matter. So I know that was a little convoluted, but like I think that speaking of doing drugs, I think that it's
like how all the people who are complaining about how self-driving cars are going to take Uber drivers' jobs 10 years ago were complaining that Uber drivers were taking taxi drivers' jobs, and they just switched seamlessly without ever having a transition point.
And everyone hates their smartphone, and everyone hates email, and everyone, like, people hate all these technologies that are totally integrated into their lives and that they are dependent on. So I guess I have kind of I have a low confidence in the connection between I told pollsters I hated this thing and that playing out in a linear way in the world. It's going to matter, but I don't think it's going to matter in the kind of very direct way that you might guess.
Speaking of low confidence in fellow Americans, the thing I wanted to ask you about, Matt, is this kind of interesting survey result that went around last week about how a majority of Americans see other Americans as bad. And we're the only country where that is true. 53% of American adults describe the morality and ethics of their fellow citizens as bad. This is a poll from the Pew Research Center, as reported by the Washington Post. In most other countries, most people said other residents are either somewhat good or good. People in America don't trust each other and don't think that other people have good intentions. And it seems like a real problem.
That's a real problem. It's extremely not great, Bob, as they say. I think part of this is an artifact of that negative polarization and of incredible growth of importance, both just sort of numerically, but psychographically, that national politics plays, national presidential politics plays in the United States consciousness and public life compared to even 25 years ago. It's just off the charts. We were obsessed with Clinton, of course, and that was crazy. That's more than 25 now, 27 years. But that has grown as the size of government has grown. So the stakes are higher and people are just constantly obsessed about this to the detriment or just to the obliteration of even knowledge about what the hell's happening around them. I've always encouraged everyone, starting with me, starting with the man in the mirror, to go and see America more. America's awesome. It's great. Americans are fun. You just visit it sometimes. It's harder now unless you have an electric car, but more expensive for a while. But Donald Trump says that's ending soon. So trust the process. But Americans are great, and America is fun and great and weird and terrific. And there's no reason to deny yourself that, even if and when you rightfully hate all the politicians, or at least the politicians on the other side. Part of it also is that the politics, the way that it's played now, is just coarse to the level that we're kind of inured to now, but it's crazy. I mean, like Steve Miller's out there saying the Democrats are basically a terrorist front group. Like that's a Tuesday. And that happens a lot. The demonization, Democrats are looking for every kind of billionaire, millionaire, or just, jackass that they can successfully demonize and tax, blame for every single problem. It's gross once you just start noticing how much that is used. And I think all of that's reflected in that number. And we have to improve that number, or it's going to be all this nightmare that Nick Gillespie has been warning us about for the last 15 years.
Nick and Katherine, real quick, is there something we can do to improve that nightmare?
I don't trust any of you, but I verify, so it works out. No, it's a really bad thing when to go from a high trust society to a low trust society. The U.S. is doing that. A big part of it is because the government at all levels is too big and it is too inconsistent. It's bad. It was bad under Biden. It's bad under Trump. But the other thing to look at are the private, the places in your life. They can be nonprofit, they can be private businesses, et cetera, that people like. And this is elite opinion hates Amazon. But people love Amazon, both in terms of revealed preference. There are, something like over 100 million Amazon Choice Amazon Prime households.
Also, speaking of polling, Amazon polls incredibly well.
Yeah.
Incredibly well. Its reputation is just amazing.
Yeah. And, and that is not an accident because they kind of say what they deliver what they say they're going to do. And then if you complain, they are kind of like, oh, you know what? Like, you're almost always right. And look for those places because there's lots of it in the United States. And it's just, you're not going to find it in politics. And if somebody asks you, who are you? And your political identification or ideology is somewhere in the top 3, you are probably a low trust person to begin with. And you got to shift out of that mode. Take more drugs.
I am a doubter of this finding. So this is the first time that Pew has asked this question. There's no trend to extrapolate from. So maybe we're becoming a lower trust society, but we don't know that from this poll. We can extrapolate it from other polls, but this is not what we're testing here. And on some level, I just find it extremely hard to believe that Italians think other Italians are gooder than Americans do, or that South Africans, I don't know. There's a lot of countries in this poll that I'm just really? And so I guess I am interested in the meta questions of this question. And maybe that's annoying, but what do Americans think is being asked here? Because my suspicion is that somehow Americans are answering what they think is a different question.
So, Katherine, is your response that we shouldn't trust the poll?
My response is I have low trust in this question, though I have high trust in Pew as a polling outfit. So, I think they'll probably tweak, adjust, ask this question again, and we'll have more information later. But I don't know. Maybe I just live in a cheerful, happy, rainbow-colored bubble. But I think most of the people I know think most people are good, and I'm confused about maybe I'm just Pauline Kaling it, but I don't think this is showing what this is being interpreted as.
All right. Speaking of movie critics, let's move on to our final segment. What you've been watching, reading, otherwise consuming in the cultural realm. Matt Welch, what do you have for us?
So I was doing one of those I would like to see maybe a semi-classic movie that I've never seen that everyone else has seen thing. So I fired up American Film Institute at the top 100 comedies. And on there was a movie from 1975 called Shampoo with Warren Beatty. I'm here to tell you that's a weird damn movie to see 50 years later. Holy cow. I think maybe if you watch this, the conclusion is the sexual revolution was wrong.
What?
It's a bad idea.
This is Reason Magazine.
Really?
I'm not sure we're allowed to conclude
that's the conclusion, the immediate conclusion when watching the movie. It's amazingly not great. It was nominated for a couple of Academy Awards. Is the 3rd or 4th most popular movie of the year. Warren Beatty is the lead. He is a Beverly Hills hairdresser, but not gay. As Carrie Fisher, who's 12, asks him right before she beds down with him. And he is absolutely vapid. He has nothing going for him. He just screws all of the people he's cutting hair for. And it's stupidly or whatever. It's interestingly, what it sets up as this is the night before the 1968 election. So here's what this hairdresser is doing. And he's got these two cougars here, and they both of them have the same lover, one of them's the husband, played by Jack Warner, who is the moral center of the film, and actually was really great in it. And people just are like having sex all the time, talking super dumbly about anything, if they have any meat on it at all, and just desperately unhappy. And the best thing about it is Julie Christie's miniskirts. And I got no complaints about that at all. It's a really odd thing. The timing's all off. It's supposed to be funny. It's not really funny. It's supposed to be social commentary. I'm not sure what direction it was intended as a social commentary in 1975. It just reads a lot different now, but just a bizarre mid-70s movie. So if you want to see it for an artifact and to learn more about like Nick Gillespie's theory about 1970s feminism or sexual revolution as portrayed in cinema, go check it out. Hal Ashby, but wow, what a weird movie.
Let me just put in a kind word for things where the timing is off, but it's supposed to be funny. Nick?
Yeah. The other, I'll just attack onto Matt real quick. Find the Mad Magazine parody of that movie, which is called Shampooped. Because Warren Beatty's character is pooped out from having so much sex. And it is one of a string of movies which I read the Mad Magazine parody as a kid because it was an R-rated movie. I couldn't get into the theater. And when I finally saw it, I was like, I have seen every important scene in this movie. And the Shampooped one is like one of the best parodies because in 6 or 8 pages, it captures everything in the movie plus a critique of it. And it's very funny.
All those Mad Magazine movie parodies from the 1970s are incredible. If you've never read the Death Wish one in particular, it just kind of spirals out how like all the sequels end up being about like the fifth cousin once removed is killed in Buffalo, and so you got to be a visual. It's so incredible. Just
they're really good. So I read Maintenance of Everything Part 1 by Stuart Brand, which is, he is 87 or 88 years old now, the co-founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, co-founder of the Long Now Foundation, Revive and Restore. He was a merry prankster in the day, started the Trips Festival in San Francisco. He is an environmentalist who helped inspire the first Earth Day and then lost a lot of the green audience because he believed that nuclear power was the obvious way to go if you care about reducing greenhouse gases. Maintenance of Everything is a fantastic book put out by Stripe Press through the with the website Works in Progress. And basically what Stuart Brand, who helped popularize the idea of the personal computer, among other things, basically says that invention and innovation is really important, but so is taking care of stuff, particularly preventive maintenance. And he tells a great story about a contest where 3 very different people were trying to circumnavigate the globe alone, sailing around the globe alone. Their different strategies lead to different outcomes based on a theory of maintenance. I interviewed him for the Reason interview. It'll come out on Wednesday. Things about brushing your teeth. You don't get a gold star for brushing your teeth really, but you get to keep your teeth. And it's kind of a deep meditation on that, particularly throughout history as well. And it is just Stuart Brand, we talk a little bit about this. He's towards the end of his life. And he has thought about things so much, and he has helped create many disruptions in all sorts of different ways and move things forward. But he also maintains a continuity with the past and a deep understanding of kind of community as well as individualism. And the Maintenance of Everything, Part 1, I'm looking forward to Part 2, which I'm sure he'll write before he is gone, is just an incredible book for everybody to read, especially if you are Diana, the woman who was talking about what kind of drug should I take, because this is also, I'll assume she's middle-aged, but it's like middle age is when whether or not you've been doing your maintenance really starts to show up. So brush your teeth.
He's a pretty formative influence on Reason throughout, from its history coming through the eras, right?
Yeah. The Whole Earth Catalog started in 1968, the same year that Reason did. And I would say it's it kind of parallel. Stuart Brand was also one of the kind of spirit animals of Wired magazine in its early days, which was co-founded by Jane Metcalf and Louis Rosetto. And Louis Rosetto. I've written about it. Matt wrote a fantastic article about Lanny Friedlander, the founder of Reason, who had a formative influence on Louis Rosetto. So there's a lot of things going back and forth. And one of the things that we actually argue about in the interview is the role of government in making certain kinds of standardizations mandatory and or creating things like land-grant universities after the Civil War. Is there a role for basic research or kind of seeding open territory with certain amounts of tax dollars that end up yielding huge results because the government doesn't try to dictate what gets done with it, but it does give people an opportunity that they might not have had otherwise to do something at scale. But so Stuart Brand, not libertarian, very libertarian friendly, libertarian adjacent, and we mix it up a little bit about the limits of his vision, which is more community based, and I think the Reason style libertarianism, which is much more kind of individual based.
Speaking of individualistic ideas, I saw the movie The Bride. It is a total and complete disaster in every single way. Like, sometimes, libertarians get asked the question, hey, what do you think a market failure is? Can you name one? And libertarians are kind of like, I don't know. They don't really have an answer. The Bride is a market failure. No one wants to see this movie, demonstrably. This is a feminist reimagining of Frankenstein that makes absolutely no damn sense just at the concept level. So the beginning is a framing device in which Mary Shelley, played by the same woman who plays this bride of Frankenstein in this movie, Jessie Buckley, talks to the camera as Mary Shelley, and she's like, I actually didn't really like my original book. The men, they made me put it out that way, but I wanted to write something else. So the story we see is a story in which her spirit possesses a young woman in a speakeasy in the Prohibition era America. But this is a Prohibition era America in which the story of Frankenstein is real. Like, actually happened. There was a Dr. Frankenstein who created a monster who is in fact still alive, played by Christian Bale, so Jessie Buckley, after she gets possessed at the beginning, she begins spouting a bunch of stuff about, mostly doesn't make any sense at all, as this movie doesn't make any sense, but about how men are bad. And so some men kill her. And then Christian Bale and a mad scientist played by Annette Bening dig her up and bring her back to life, at which point she continues to spout a whole bunch of stuff about how men are bad. And the movie is bad. There's nothing that makes any sense or that is enjoyable in any way. It's sort of supposed to be wild and zany, but it's not. This movie fails even as camp. This is... Like, I was inspired in some ways to ask that question about Kristi Noem earlier because I was thinking about The Bride. Because like Kristi Noem, it's really hard to say any nice thing about this movie. It is just an absolute clusterfuck from minute one to 2 hours in which every single creative choice is a bad one. And it really feels like a kind of time capsule from before the vibe shift, from the 2010s, like something that sort of slipped through and got left over. I mean, again, there's all this sort of subplot about how the cops are bad, right? There's a kind of all cops are bastards, right? Defund the police subplot to this. But also, Jessie Buckley's character, she never says anything that drives the plot or convinces you she has like an arc or a story, but she's just constantly sort of babbling nonsensical feminist Zen koans. The climax of the movie, I am not making this up, is she's back in the Frankenstein lab or the Annette Bening's lab where she's created, and she's just sort of swinging a pistol around and a bunch of cops yelling, "Me too, me too." And that's what the whole movie is like. I don't recommend it. And it does look like most people didn't go see it. There's also reports of record walkouts. I can understand why. Katherine, what'd you see?
Nobody saw it, and their walkout sounds like a market success. So I read the book The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny. It's by Kiran Desai, and it's it's the book that your mom is reading right now, probably. And it is it's really, really good. It is sort of self-consciously, in a way that is slightly annoying, but ultimately works, a sprawling intergenerational saga type book. It's Sonia and Sunny are the sort of children of Indian families that are intertwined in interesting ways. And they come to the U.S., each in their own way. Their visas and immigration problems feature prominently in the plot. And a lot of the novel is about what it is like to be the child of a relatively well-off Indian family who wants nothing more than for their children to come to the United States and succeed there, and then also is totally crushed by the fact that their children are not Indian anymore and not there to care for them in their old age, which is the whole deal of being Indian in the telling of this book. And it's extremely blunt and kind of extremely direct about how all these things have trade-offs. It is the opposite of propaganda, this book, and I really appreciated that about it. The back third of it, or the back quarter of it, is also a 9/11 novel. So it actually takes place pre-9/11, and I at least didn't really clock that. It sort of read as modern-ish but timeless-ish. And then 9/11 happens, and that kind of influences what is going on with the characters who are Muslim. But that is not a major plot point in the book, which I also really appreciated. They could have made a whole thing about being a minority of a minority of a minority, and they didn't. The
question about the 9/11 part.
Yes.
The back part of the book. Does that come about 3/4 of the way through the novel?
Yes, it does. The Shadow of Death. And
Screenplay structure.
And is 9/11 an inside job?
We do not know from this book. But there are a variety of inside jobs, including the theft of a maybe magical, maybe not kind of amulet that is protecting the family and maybe the characters. There's a bit magical realism in here for those who like that sort of thing. But it's really done it's very tasteful. It's very limited. Just really readable, really good, really long. So you want to settle in. And my kind of final note on it is 9/11 was a long time ago, you guys. I read this book kind of like, this book is now-ish. And then it was like, oh, nope, this is basically a historical novel. It's just history that I lived through. So I guess I'm old is what I'm saying. Thank you.
And
this book is good.
And DHS has existed ever since.
Yes.
Are we closer to 9/11 than
we don't
9/11
do this, Matt.
is to shampoo?
Shush your face. We do not do the are we closer to 9/11 than math because it makes us
there.
upset.
It's right in that midpoint. And
the loneliness of Sonia and Sunny, I recommend it. A good book about the immigrant experience.
All right, folks, that is our show this week. If you like this podcast, you want to support what we do here and at the Reason Foundation more generally, you can go to reason.com/donate. That's reason.com/donate. Reason Roundtable will return.